The decisions you make in your life is very important. You have a few more days to arrive at the right decision as far as your leaders are concerned. Elect with intelligence. Welcome once again to News Analysis. News Analysis, a weekly magazine on current affairs. To begin with, the main points in a nutshell. Japan quake prompts Fukushima evacuation. Ivory Coast, Ouattara wants European Union sanctions to be lifted. Nato apologizes for hitting Libya rebels. US budget, Barack Obama hopes to avoid shutdown. Brazil school shooting, Rio de Janeiro gunman kills 12 students. India offers Anna Hazare a new anti-graft panel. And now the news in detail. Japan quake prompts Fukushima evacuation. Workers at the damaged Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant were evacuated after a fresh earthquake with a magnitude of 7.1, but officials said it had no detectable effect at the plant. A tsunami alert for the next northeastern Japan was issued but lifted after 90 minutes. The earthquake at a depth of 49 kilometers struck close to the epicenter of the 11th March quake, which triggered a devastating tsunami. Japanese authorities ordered a new evacuation from the warning zone. All 7 workers at Fukushima Daiichi were safe, a spokesman said. The plant operated TEPCO told news conference in Tokyo. They have not been injured and they have all taken shelter in our seismic-resistant building. We are continuing to inject water, or we can continue the injection of operation at reactors 1, 2 and 3, said the spokesman, whose name was not given. The workers are trying to keep the damaged reactors cool to stop further release of radioactive material. Thursday's quake struck at 23:32 local time, that means 14:32 GMT on Thursday, 118 kilometers north of Fukushima, 40 kilometers offshore. First report said it had a magnitude of 7.4, but that was later revised downwards to 7.1 according to the US Geological Survey. Ivory Coast, Ouattara wants European Union sanctions lifted. Ivory Coast's internationally recognized President Alassane Ouattara has urged the European Union to lift sanctions in a bid to restart the ailing economy. Mr. Ouattara now controls the main cocoa exporting port of San Pedro and wants to restart the state economy. But his troops are still not in control of all the main city of Abidjan, where his rival Laurent Gbagbo remains holed up in the presidential residence. Aid agencies are warning a deepening humanitarian crisis in Abidjan. Residents of the city are without basic amenities such as running water and power, and food supplies are running low. Witnesses say the bodies are lying on the streets after days of bitter fighting between loyalists of the 2 presidential claimants. Mr. Ouattara, widely recognized as the winner of the presidential election last November, told Ivorian TV he was taking measures to get the economy back up and running. I have asked the European Union sanctions on the ports of Abidjan and San Pedro and certain public entities to be lifted, he said. Ivory Coast is the world's biggest cocoa-producing nation, but uncertainty and violence since the disputed election had badly damaged the industry. Mr. Ouattara said the central bank would begin reopening its branches and the army would secure delivery of medical supplies to hospitals and food to markets. He blamed Mr. Gbagbo for plunging the country into crisis, but said his forces now had presidential palace under blockade. Advisors to Mr. Gbagbo, who insists he won the election, say embattled incumbent is determined not to surrender. President Gbagbo will not cede, said his Paris-based advisor Toussaint Alain. It's a question of principle. President Gbagbo is not a monarch, he is not a king, he is not an emperor. He is president elected by his people. French Defense Minister Gerard Longuet said Mr. Gbagbo had fewer than 1,000 troops left loyal to him. NATO apologizes for hitting Libya rebels. The commander of Libya's rebel forces has said NATO apologized for mistakenly hitting a column of rebel tanks near the eastern town of Ajdabiya. General Abdel Fattah Yunus said the deadly airstrike had occurred despite a warning to the NATO and the tanks were being moved to the front line. NATO said it was investigating the claim without giving further details. Rebels said 4 rebels died, while local doctors told the reporters that at least 13 fighters had been killed in the airstrike. We would like to receive answers about what happened. We would like a rational and convincing explanation, General Yunus said afterwards. He also said such mistakes must not be repeated and called for better cooperation in the future. But the general stressed that there was no tension between the opposition and NATO, despite anger among some local residents. It was the third such strike incident in recent days involving international forces deployed to protect Libyan civilians. NATO, with all the equipment they have, is this the second mistake? It's really a mistake or something arranged secretly? People have their own doubts. US budget, Barack Obama hopes to avoid shutdown. Talks aimed at avoiding a shutdown of the US government had broken up with no deal, leaving negotiators just hours to agree a budget compromise. President Obama said the progress had been made after nighttime talks with congressional leaders. He said he was not prepared to express wild optimism, but hoped be able to announce a deal on Friday morning. Without a deal, the low funding most of the US government will expire at midnight on Friday, forcing a shutdown. Talks have also stalled for days as Republicans, urged on by a fiscally conservative Tea Party movement, push for a longer budget cuts than Democrats are willing to concede. Mr. Obama held 2 sessions of talks on Thursday with the Republican Speaker of the House of Representatives, John Boehner, and the Democratic Senate Majority Leader, Harry Reid. The president spoke after second session ended without an agreement. I'm not yet prepared to express wild optimism, but I think we are further along today than yesterday, he said. The White House then announced that his planned trip to the state of Indiana on Friday had been postponed. Brazil school shooting, Rio de Janeiro gunman kills 12 students. A gunman has shot down at least 12 children at a school in the Brazilian city of Rio de Janeiro before killing himself, police said. At least 12 others were wounded when the man entered the school with 2 revolvers and began shooting. The killer has been identified as a 23-year-old former pupil, Wellington Meneses de Oliveira. President Dilma Rousseff wept as she condemned the school massacre, the first of its kind in Brazil. The attack happened at the Escola Municipal Tasco da Silveira school in the western Relengo area. Officials said Oliveira arrived at the start of the school day and got into the building by saying he had come to give a lecture, but then went into a classroom and began shooting. Teachers barricaded the doors of other classrooms while children hid under desks. Some wounded children escaped and alerted the police, who rushed to the scene. India offers Anna Hazare new anti-graft panel. The Indian government has offered to form a new panel to draft a strong anti-graft law in response to activist Anna Hazare's fast unto death. The government says the panel will include members of civil society, one of Mr. Hazare's key demands. But differences remain over who would lead the panel and whether it would have legal sanction. Mr. Hazare is one of the fourth day on his fast to pressure the government to enact strong anti-corruption laws. As per international reports, India is one of the countries where corruption is at its peak. On Thursday, Congress leader Sonia Gandhi urged Mr. Hazare to give up his fast. She said his views would receive the government's full attention as we move forward to fight this menace of corruption. Earlier, Federal Minister Kapil Sibal announced that the government was willing to form a panel comprising of 5 members, each from government and from civil society, to draft the Jan Lokpal Bill, Citizens Ombudsman Bill. However, Mr. Hazare has demanded that this panel be officially notified, which means it has some legal sanction. An official notification is needed to ensure that the government does not make a fool of us, Mr. Hazare's representative Arvind Kejriwal said. Also, while anti-corruption and activists want Mr. Hazare to head the panel, the government has proposed Finance Minister Pranab Mukherjee.